The air crackled with tension. Diplomats huddled in quiet corners, their faces etched with worry. Every hour seemed to bring the world closer to the brink. The major powers, locked in a bitter struggle for dominance, were amassing troops along their borders. The threat of war, once a distant nightmare, now loomed large. At the heart of the crisis were two ideologically opposed blocs, the East and the West. Years of mistrust and animosity had eroded the fragile peace that followed the last global conflict. Each side accused the other of aggression, of violating international treaties, of pushing the world towards catastrophe. The rhetoric grew more heated with each passing day, fueling a climate of fear and suspicion. The world held its breath, hoping against hope that diplomacy would prevail, but the path to peace was fraught with obstacles. The leaders of both blocs were under immense pressure from their own people to stand firm, to refuse any compromise that might be perceived as weakness. The stakes were incredibly high, the consequences of failure almost too unbearable to contemplate. The weight of the world rested on the shoulders of a few key individuals. Seasoned diplomats, thrust into extraordinary circumstances, found themselves working day and night, desperately trying to find a way out of the impasse. Their every move was scrutinized, their every word analyzed for any hint of progress or retreat. The fate of millions, perhaps billions, hung in the balance. The iconic General Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy. Ambassadors from every nation had gathered for an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council. The atmosphere was electric, a palpable sense of urgency gripping the room. All eyes were on the representatives of the East and West, who sat facing each other across a seemingly insurmountable divide. Eastern Bloc Ambassador, the West's provocations and imperialist ambitions cannot be tolerated any longer. His words were met with stony silence from the Western delegations and thunderous applause from those sympathetic to the East's cause. Western Bloc Ambassador, we call for restraint, for dialogue, for a return to the principles of international law. The catastrophic consequences of conflict must be avoided. We urge our counterparts to step back from the brink. Hours turned into days as the Security Council remained deadlocked. Speeches were made, accusations were leveled, and pleas for peace were ignored. The world watched with bated breath, hoping for a breakthrough, a sign that reason might yet prevail. But as the days turned into nights, the hope began to dwindle. Emilia Rostov, a young but tenacious journalist, found herself at the heart of the unfolding crisis. Dispatched to cover an international summit convened in a last-ditch effort to avert disaster, she was determined to capture the drama, the tension, and the human stories behind the headlines. Emilia Rostov. As I listened to the speeches and observed the closed-door meetings, I couldn't shake the feeling that the world was teetering on a precipice. The leaders of the East and West, though physically present in the same room, seemed worlds apart. Their body language spoke volumes, the icy stares, the curt nods, the palpable lack of warmth. Despite the seemingly insurmountable obstacles, there were glimmers of hope. Behind the scenes, away from the glare of the cameras, diplomats were working tirelessly to find common ground. They understood the stakes, the potential for catastrophic loss of life, and they were determined to exhaust every avenue for peace. Emilia Rostov, I watched in awe as these dedicated individuals, often working on little sleep and fueled by endless cups of coffee, navigated the treacherous waters of international diplomacy. They drafted and redrafted proposals, searching for language that could bridge the divide without compromising their respective positions. It was a grueling, often thankless task, but they pressed on, driven by the belief that even the smallest chance of success was worth fighting for. While diplomats struggled to find a peaceful resolution, events on the ground were rapidly spiraling out of control. A seemingly minor border skirmish between the forces of the East and West threatened to ignite a wider conflict. Daniel Campbell. As I watched with growing alarm, reports of the incident crossed my desk. The details were still murky, but it was clear that the situation was extremely volatile. Both sides accused the other of being the aggressor, and tensions were running dangerously high. As Daniel delved deeper into the intelligence reports, he was struck by a chilling thought: this could be the spark that ignites the powder keg. He knew that both sides had contingency plans in place for just such a scenario, plans that involved the rapid escalation of military force. What had begun as a minor border incident could quickly escalate into a full-blown war. Daniel Campbell, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on my shoulders. I knew that my analysis, my interpretation of the intelligence could influence the decisions made by my superiors. I had to be absolutely certain, to separate fact from fiction in the heat of the moment. The fate of my nation, perhaps even the world, could hinge on my judgment.